Hi everyone, Sean Smith from Don't Diss My Ability again, coming at you with day 2 of parenting a child with ODD. And yesterday I talked about the shit sandwich that parents get to eat, and I looked at it from the perspective of the parent. Today I'm shifting gears. I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of the child. Again, not to excuse behavior, but to help parents and family and general public understand a little bit of the insight into why this stuff happens. Um, there, there are different angles to kind of look at it, but I guess to kind of describe what's happening in the kid's head, I haven't met a kid yet with ADHD, with ODD that didn't have ADHD. So their thoughts are constantly cycling and racing, and they're thinking about themselves and things that they want or things that they would like. And as these things cycle and race, the more they happen, the more concrete the idea or the concept that they've come up with solidifies, and it's gone from abstract to, in their mind, real. And when it doesn't turn out the way that they envisioned, it's kind of like the house of cards comes crumbling down and they lash out. And it can happen a lot, and they can lash out in different ways. It can come out in a verbal assault. It can come out in physically hurting people, or it could be property damage, right? And so from the perspective of the kid, they're constantly in fight or flight. There's a conversation happening in their head over and over and over. And anytime you talk, speak, or interject, you're interrupting that thought process, which means they've got to go back in their mind to where they were last if they're able to pick up. And if they're not, then they just get that much more frustrated. Now, I had somebody ask me, is it common for kids with ODD to be fine at school or fine out in public, and then, be less kind, or, for lack of a better word, horrible or a little monster at home? And I kind of compare it to shaking a pop bottle. Okay, so all day when this kid is out at school or in public and they seem fine, that's what's happening on the outside. That's the exterior, right? But you can't see what's happening on the interior. So it's kind of like that bottle is being shooken up, and then when they get home, it's like the cap comes off and everything just bubbles over and unloads, and it sucks because it's the parents, a lot of the times, or siblings, who face the wrath of whoever that person is, and unfortunately, they know exactly what to say and how to hurt those around them. They go right for the jugular. Now, another challenging part is that when we as people become emotionally deregulated, we can say and do things that we don't necessarily remember. And so then that becomes a whole other thing, because respect is a big part of this, and perception from parents and the general public is that, if people in public see how their kid treats them, they won't feel respected. And so they feel they need to take an authoritative approach to dealing with their child. And then that's when we see a lot of the clashing, a lot of the butting of the heads. And so it's just another layer to this complicated onion that is ODD. The kid, it's like they're the main character in their own movie. And every time you want their attention, it's like you're plucking them out of that environment, almost like you're startling them awake, which is not a good feeling if you've ever been startled awake. But that's kind of what it's like. We're pulling them out of their world and plucking them and just putting them right in ours and expecting them to pick up exactly where we're at. And their minds don't work that way. And so there's a lot of butting heads that happens. And so the butting of heads can happen at school, right? A lot of these kids end up getting kicked out, suspended, or even worse, expelled, because they get into battles with the teachers and the administrators. They dig their heels in. They get into trouble. They know what to do to get out of a situation or to get out of class. It also affects their ability to make friends, right? If somebody's constantly arguing with someone else, are you going to want them as a friend? Well, maybe not, right? If someone is extremely negative all the time and you're just waiting for them to take it out on you or to lash out, you're probably not going to choose to spend time with that person. And when it comes to respect, parents often will feel embarrassed because they're being judged by other people. If somebody sees a kid out who's acting disrespectfully, we've all heard people say, if that were my kid, I'd have a heavy hand, or they wouldn't, they'd be grounded for however long. They wouldn't be able to do this or do that. It's not realistic. And it sucks because it is embarrassing. Nobody wants to be that parent who feels like they've been taken advantage of over and over and over. But here's the thing, is that there's also the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, right? So when they're emotionally deregulated and they say and do things that they don't necessarily mean, and then they're back to baseline, it's almost as if nothing happened. And then you go back to square one, and they don't understand the damage that they've done to the relationship, but yet expect that you're going to drive them to wherever it is they want to go, or you're going to give them that $10 that you talked about earlier. And you're like, no, I don't think so. I don't think it's okay for you to call me an asshole in front of your friends or go off on me and then think that I'm going to drive you somewhere. Like, that's just not going to happen, right? But they can't understand why, and that turns into a whole other battle, is that they don't remember saying that thing, and then that becomes the argument. And then it's a he said, she said, or I said, or you said, and then it keeps going back and forth. And then when does it end, right? So it is challenging. It really is. They can't see the emotional damage that they've done. And they need to repair the relationship. Now, with parents, it's hard, right? You'll always love your kids, but you don't always like them. Well, think of it from the kids' perspective of they're constantly being told that they're not able to do something, and it's because of you. And how it's always their fault, somebody else's fault, and never theirs. Think of the mindset of that person and what it must be like to think that everybody's conspiring against them. Nobody wants them to be happy, right? It's like they hear every other word of a conversation so they can string it together and turn it against you and turn it into an argument over something that wasn't even meant to be an argument, right? It feels like a constant picking. And so some of these kids will isolate, right? It's hard to make friends when you're that person who's just constantly negative. But it's also hard for the kid because of the mixed messages we as parents give out. We tell our kids love is unconditional. And then all of a sudden we put conditions on it. You can't talk to me that way, right? You're going to do your chores. You're going to do this. You're going to do that, right? So unfortunately, love is actually conditional, right? If your kid calls you an asshole, and 5 minutes later wants to snuggle up with you and give you a hug, after a while, you're gonna shy away a little bit because you've been hurt repeatedly, and you don't know when it's going to happen again, but you do know that it is going to happen, right? So from the perspective of the kid, their minds are so busy that there's a lot of what they do that they don't actually remember. They really don't. And so as we argue, they're trying to string together bits and pieces of information that happened in their mind, but it wasn't our experience, and it likely wasn't what actually happened, but they're fabricating an alternate reality to make it seem as though they're going to win the argument or they're going to come out on top. So where do you kind of cut bait and decide, okay, the conversation's not worth having, right? And it's a slippery slope because you don't want to feel taken advantage of, and you want your child to take responsibility for their actions. But if they don't remember what happened, how do you get them to take responsibility for something that they don't remember doing? It's really, really tricky. So it's not easy. It really, really isn't. And for a lot of these parents, it's important to create structure, expectations, and routine, and to follow through. That's a big one, because when you start not following through, that's when kids feel like you've given up on them. And it's hard sometimes to follow through, because sometimes it seems like it's easier not to. But in the long run, I assure you, it is definitely easier to follow through, because then you've been consistent. And the next time something happens, you've built that consistency, right, in dealing with your kids. But it's not easy from the perspective of the parent or the child. Think of the child constantly being told that what they're doing is wrong. No wonder they want to isolate. They can't get along with anybody. Every conversation leads to an argument. And once you cross that line, you can't go back, unless it's your family, who's just supposed to accept you for who you are, except for that when you're bitter and you pick a whole bunch of fights, that damages the relationship. You know, the other challenge is that a lot of these kids with ODD, they are takers. We as parents are typically givers. So how do you come to grips with the fact that this kid is just going to take whatever you give them? And makes it even harder. No matter how much you give, it's never enough. They're never going to be satisfied with what you offer or provide them with. So then we have this feeling of, why did I even bother? Right? But again, it comes back to the unconditional positive regard, the unconditional love for our kids. It's not always easy and it's not always perfect, but it is always important. I'm Sean Smith. Thanks a lot for watching. If you find value in this video, please share it with people in your network. Somebody with ADHD, ODD, there's a parent out there that needs to watch this, so please like and share. Have a great day.